Hi, and welcome to our training on parent engagement. My name is Rebecca Roberts, and I'm the lead clinical director here at AMK Counseling. I work with children, teens, and adults, as well as parents of young clients, treating primarily through a CBT, DBT, and space-trained lens.
And my name is Abbie Kelley. I'm the founder here at AMK Counseling. I work with young kids through adulthood. I use a lot of CBT, ACT, ERP evidence-based practices, and we're excited to share this training with you.
So today we're going to be focusing on how clinicians can get parents of their younger clients involved in the therapeutic process.
For today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the first part is going to be the types of parents. The second portion is going to be more about providing psychoeducation to parents, the type of information we're going to be giving to them. And then the third part is how to make parents a part of the therapeutic process and what that looks like, and some tips and tricks for that. And then the fourth one is going into maintaining an ongoing relationship with parents. So the importance of parent engagement. It's when we're working with kids, regardless of the age, it's really important to have parents involved. They're a huge resource for what's going on. We only get our clients for an hour a week, and they're telling us and giving us some more light on what's going on outside of session. It leads to better outcomes because we also know that we are only working with one small part of the system. And in order for the kiddos or the clients or the team, whoever we're working with, that's the minor, to have better outcomes in therapy, getting the team involved, having more people in place, and the obvious people there and their parents really helps support them and engage more fully in the goals that they have. And even if they have a rocky relationship, most of it, kids want their parents involved. These are their parents for life. We're their therapists for a shorter term. They're their parents for the long run. They actually want their parents involved. And for the small percentage that don't, that's giving us an understanding even of the system and how and what involvement looks like, even if it's not as involved as we would like. So having that engagement is just huge. This is their home. This is where they are 24/7. We want parents to really be an extension of what we're doing, and we're an extension of them as well. Any other thoughts you have?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
So let's start by looking at some of the parenting styles or patterns that exist. These examples that we have here come from an emotion-focused family therapy lens. And so that lens has compiled these different patterns that parents exhibit and applied animal metaphors to help us better understand the parenting styles that might be most helpful and the ones that are a little bit less helpful. So we're going to start with the unhelpful ones. And the first one is the jellyfish parenting style. So jellyfish parents tend to feel and express big emotions while having a little bit less control or difficulty managing those emotions. When you think of a jellyfish, you kind of think of them kind of being a little bit flimsy in the ocean. They're really like their shape is very much determined by the waves and the environment that they're in and just like the space. So when you think about these parents, they are impacted by their family members and there's just little control in their emotion style. The next one is the ostrich parent. So when you think of an ostrich, you may picture them with their head in the sand. So these parents that fall into this category are a little bit more practical with their kids, but they're more conservative with the way that they express their emotion and the emotional vocabulary that they use. Another parenting style is the kangaroo parent. So as you can imagine, kangaroo parents carry their joeys in their pouches all the time for protection. And human kangaroo parents do the same thing. They attempt to protect and shield their children from distress. And so that's very well-intentioned. It's a very well-intentioned parenting style, but attempting to erase discomfort or erase heartache and pain from your kid's life really doesn't give them an example of how they can manage their own emotions. And then we have the rhino parent. And so this kind of parent is a little bit more, how would you say, kind of charging into interactions with their kiddos, uses argumentation or confrontation as a way to persuade them. And there's a lot less balance of the practical and the emotional. It's a lot more logical.
And I think these animal analogies really just help for me to be able just to better understand, okay, how am I approaching this? It's not as a means to put parents in a box or anything like that. It gives us a better understanding of how they're approaching parenting, which leads us to the type of helpful parenting styles that we're really our goal of therapy is always to be empowering. And even when we're working with the kiddo or the teen, we're trying to also help the parents feel more confident in what they're doing and trying to move more towards these helpful parenting styles that we know only complement and are an extension of the goals that we're working on in therapy. So the first one is the St. Bernard. They use a lot of calm, compassion. They're now I'm like looking. They have a balance of compassion and consistency, and they're really being able to model how to manage their emotions and consistently manage that and have those skills in order to model that and help guide the situation. So even if their child is dysregulated, they're able to stay cool, calm, and collected and be able to move forward. The dolphin is another style where they're able to lead and know when to lead and when to be led. So it's a really good balance of using between both of those, of when to follow and when to be the leader. And again, a lot of that consistency and caring and being able to read their kids' cues.
Yeah, I really like these styles, and it's helpful for me to even think of myself as a parent of like, okay, what ways am I showing up with my own kiddos? I know as I was thinking about the unhelpful parenting styles, I've definitely had some rhino moments. I've definitely had some kangaroo moments. I know that I would love to have more of a St. Bernard or a dolphin approach. And so it's just helpful to kind of keep that in mind. So we'd encourage you when you're, thinking about your own clients and the parents to think about those parenting styles that they may be representing.
And I think going off of that, as our role as therapists, what are we modeling? How are we modeling the St. Bernard? How are we modeling the dolphin style when our client is dysregulated, when the parents are calling us too? So we're able to model that and demonstrate these skills and bring that out of the parents. Kind of like what Rebecca said, myself as a parent, I'm going to have moments where I'm in the unhelpful parenting style. That doesn't mean that that's my general parenting. And we're teaching self-compassion too. Of course, they're going to have moments of the unhelpful or even just overall that might be part of their presentation. And we can still empower them and be gentle with how they're learning and how they're growing as parents.
So as we're starting to interact with these parents and with the children that are going to be our clients, it's really helpful to take note of how the parent is presenting in front of us. So just as we observe our clients in session, we use our clinical lens to observe our parents and understand and empathize with them so we can build that relationship. So these are just a few things to consider when you're working with the parents for the first time. Ask yourself, how is the parent presenting when they're working with you? Are you noticing that they are eager or engaged or super willing to participate? Or do you notice that maybe they're a little bit more reserved or unsure? And if that's the case, there could be a variety of different reasons for that. And if you're sitting with the client and the parent in the same session, what do you notice about their interactions together?
And going into what might the parent be thinking or feeling about their role in child's therapy. It's a really vulnerable process to come in, to bring your child into therapy and to be trusting someone with that. So I think, especially when we're seeing how they're presenting, I think it's really important to think about why might they be presenting that way? What might they be feeling? How are they seeing themselves in the role of therapy? And how can we help guide them throughout this process? Because even if they've done it before, they haven't done it with you as the therapist. And a lot of parents haven't done it before. So really being able to understand what they're feeling about their role and help clarify expectations, help walk them through it and meet them where they're at.
And you'll also want to consider understanding these parenting styles and figuring out how that informs your work. I know I come from a strengths-based approach. So if a parent comes to me and I'm noticing maybe they have some of those kangaroo style, patterns or behaviors, maybe what I'll think about is, a strength of theirs is that they really care about their kid and they really want to protect their kid. And I'll use that to inform how I'm going to work with them later on and what kind of goals we're going to develop. I also noticed that if a parent is coming in and they're a little bit more cautious, maybe using that understanding of why they're cautious or why they're self-conscious, just based on the details that they give us, you might want to tailor the way you provide psychoeducation or tailor the goals that you set for the client and the parent.
And lastly, we think about how as clinicians kind of what I was talking about before, that we can model grace, compassion, and encouragement. We're partnering with them. And truly, I know we feel very honored when parents bring us in and when they're trusting us with their children. That's a really big honor. So it's making sure that we're helping them. We're getting ahead and being 2 steps ahead of them feeling vulnerable, going through this journey, and we're leading them through it.
So as we start to dive into how we bring parents into that relationship, it's really important to highlight the 2 key factors here. We have validation and psychoeducation. We'll jump into those. So when we're talking about validation, okay, what do we mean by this? We keep using this word validation. It's holding space for, and that parenting is really hard. It is probably the hardest job that parents have. There are a lot of different hats that you have to wear as a parent. And so when you acknowledge that as the clinician, that goes a long way. Also, parents want you to acknowledge, and they want to have someone recognize that they really, really love their kid. So that validation might seem pretty simple, but like I said, it really does build the relationship. So as you're starting to get to know the parent and you're starting to conduct these interactions with the client, one thing that you can do is ask the parent to brag about their kid. Parents love bragging about their children. I know I do. I could talk about them all day. And, you want them to be able to talk about their kids' strengths, about their joys, their hobbies. Ask them what they like most about their child. I know when I do this in session, that's one of my favorite questions to ask, because I get to see a parent get really enthusiastic about their kid, and they get really excited. Sometimes they get really emotional. And I also get to see this child hearing that. And sometimes that may be the first time they're hearing that information. And you can see them reacting to that positive feedback. And it really does build that relationship between the parent and child. And it's you getting data about how they interact in real time.
Even if they're not as receptive to it,
Yeah.
That's information that we're gathering. It seems difficult for them to hear this, or the kid's shying away from it, or they're really soaking it up, or they're agreeing. It gives us cues even about the system and our client, for sure.
Absolutely. And the other part of that is being able to incorporate your knowledge of child development is really helpful when you're trying to validate a parent's observations and concerns. When I work with particularly preteen or teen clients and talking with their parents, one thing that I'll often joke about is how developmentally appropriate it is for that child to not listen to their parent or to have different views because they're building their identity. But I also validate the fact that that is really, really hard. And that can be a really trying moment and stage in their development for the parent. And so when I do this, parents usually agree. And then I'm able to ask them questions like, okay, how does that impact your relationship with your kid? Or how does, that, change the way that you speak with them? Or what are some things that are helpful? So being able to validate the parent's concerns and use your observations and your knowledge can be really helpful for developing that conversation.
And I think along the way, it helps build trust, because you're sharing in a really organic way your expertise and your knowledge of this developmental process, and you're helping normalize and helping connect with them in a way that is specific to our role. So that kind of goes into it. I'm going to move the little picture around so you all can see our presentation. That goes into the psychoeducation that we're providing. Don't assume, even people that have been a part of, that have come to you and they've been a therapist in the past, explain your process of therapy to them. Again, this is a really unstructured space. Explain the structure behind it, and that helps parents understand what this is. It helps manage expectations. You're also saying it in front of the minor as well, so that they can understand the therapeutic process. But we really start with that even at the intake call. We explain the therapeutic process to them. And then we say, we're going to say this again in the intake when we're meeting with your child. So explaining the therapeutic process is really important. Part of that is being able to even help understand, when we do a lot of play therapy here. So even understanding what that looks like, what it is, what it isn't. It's not babysitting. We're looking for this. And a big thing that we do along the way too is encouraging parents, ask us questions, challenge us. That is something that we like. Hey, Abbie, why are you doing that? You will never offend us. And I think that's a really important thing to say to parents, to encourage them to challenge us, because we're going to be challenging them. That's part of the therapeutic process. We're challenging them to grow, to play off their strengths, to learn new things. So we want them challenging us as well. Like, hey, Becca, why are you doing that? oh my gosh, I would love to explain my process a little bit more. And setting that up from the beginning establishes a really good relationship where we're not the expert over this whole process. We need to partner together. You know your child, the child knows themselves. It's the three of us really working, and maybe we're bringing in the schools. Maybe we're talking. That's another thing that we're bringing up is who and when we would be talking to other people. But it's really all of us bringing together the different pieces of the puzzle to be able to see the whole thing. And we each have our role, and defining that role is really important, which goes into the clear expectations of parent involvement. One of the things we like to do here is sometimes we'll meet with, depending on the age of the child, we'll meet with the parents first before meeting with the kids. I would say most of the time, though, we're doing the initial intake call, and then we're meeting all together as the unit. The caregivers are there and the child, we invite them to be part of the process. And we're explaining what the expectations are, that we want parent involvement. We're saying to the kiddo, hey, we're going to be working with your parents. We're going to be working with you. We're your team. And even just physically in that space for the child to be able to see all of us together and communicating is really important. So we're laying out the expectations for parent involvement. The main expectation that we lay out in the beginning is we want parent involvement. What we say is it's going to look different as we get to know your child. We cater it depending on a 17-year-old is going to need different involvement than a 4-year-old. So along the way, what we do is we usually meet after the third or fourth session of meeting with the child. We set up a parent session to meet with them and go over more expectations. Hey, I have a little bit of an understanding of what your child is going through, what's going on. What I would like to do is do monthly check-ins, or what I want to hear is what you're seeing at home and combine what I've seen with what you've seen, and even with what you've seen after sessions too. And we'll get a better understanding of how and when we should be communicating. It might be weekly. We might be bringing them into sessions weekly. It might be monthly. But what we're doing is we're going to be establishing that dependent on the client-parent relationship that is playing out. Any thoughts that you would add to that one?
No, I think that's really great. And just like reiterating that and reminding the client too, that this is, a collaboration. And so you will be reaching out with the parents. Super important.
So the expectations, no matter what, they're going to look different client to client, but you want to be defining them. And they're going to adjust throughout too. As the child is making progress, the expectations of the parent involvement is going to look a little different too. What we just really advocate for is to communicate those expectations. And when they change, have conversations about it and have meetings. And then the third one is emphasizing the importance of modeling and doing the work at home. Everything can't fall on the client. So we really need the parents to be modeling some of the stuff we're doing. And that's why we need to be communicating with them. Hey, we're working on expressing and naming their emotions. One of the ways that you could do that is if you could label your emotions more at home, if you could talk out loud and have them hear what your internal process is. That's one of the ways that we might give homework to the parents, or assignments for them to be working on and doing the actual stuff at home, which then only complements what we're doing. Because if it's only the hour a week that we have with them, progress is just going to just snail along. But if we have the parents working on it too and really joining, then progress is going to go faster. And it also sends the message to our client that it doesn't all fall on them, that their parents are doing work too, that their parents are learning new things. So it takes the pressure off the kid of like, oh, okay, I'm the problem. I have to be the one. No, we're all working together to help empower you, to help you make changes in your life. And in fact, we're having your parents make some changes too. And along the way, we might be making some other recommendations for for family therapy or for individual therapy for the parents too. But that modeling work is really important. And that's something that we'll talk about with the parents.
And I really like that too, because I think it offers a new level of appreciation for what the client is practicing and what they're trying. When you have a parent coming home and they're modeling the same things, they may come back to the session and they say, I really tried to, look at my mood and evaluate what my triggers were for this week. And it was really hard. And it's like, yes. And that's what your teen or that's what your child is doing as well. So you guys can talk about this together and you can see this is the work that they're putting in and this is the effort that it takes.
Yeah. And I feel like with that too, the parents, not only are they making these changes and empowered with it too, they're able to share the wins with their kiddo as well. And it's just more of a connecting moment. The other piece that I say, as much as we want them modeling, again, this is where that grace and compassion and no judgment really comes into play with parents. They're going to come in and be like, oh, we weren't able to do it, or I wasn't able to do this or that. And that's okay. We're telling them that anything they're doing is great and bonus. We're not judging them or hammering on them if they're not able to do some of the extra stuff that we're asking them to do. We're trying to normalize and see, yeah, it is hard. And again, I think then they have even more appreciation of what their child's going through because they're doing the work and we're able to point that out. Or if no one's doing the work, then we're able to be like, you know what, maybe this just isn't the right time for therapy. Because it's quality over quantity, right? We want really quality sessions. We want to be able to have goals that they're progressing towards. But we also want to be realistic with where the system is and what they're able to do. So having that understanding and conversation with parents as well of understanding that it's an ongoing process and to have some grace and compassion. So the next piece we're going into is kind of what we've been saying all along, but just doing it more overtly is making parents part of the process. These are some things to consider when managing the dual relationship. So we know we have our client in front of us who is, let's say they're 13, but we also know that that 13-year-old cannot exist without the system that they're a part of. So we really have two clients here. We have the kiddo and then we have their caregivers. And we need to really include the parents as part of this process and know that we're balancing both of this because we also know if we're not including the parents, we can't see the minor without parents' consent. So we want them to be involved and we want to utilize the strengths that they have within their child's role, within their child's world, the role that they have. And we want to honor that. Even, I think the same is true, even when we have divorced parents and even if they can't get along, one of the things we're saying to them is you don't have to respect each other, but we need you to respect the role that you have in your child's life. Your dad, your mom, or your mom, your mom. And we want you respecting the role that you have in your child's life because it's huge and it goes way beyond the role that we have. Our role is to fade into the background and empower them outside of therapy. The parents are there for life. So we might as well be able to work through it and have them be part of this process of how they can do that for life too and make some lifelong changes. So kind of going into the number one is validating the parent's role, regardless of the family system. Like we said, if it's a contentious divorce, if it's a family unit and grandma's part of it too, let's bring in who are the caregivers that are important in this child's life. Let's validate their role and honor how important it is to the child.
Yeah, I think while we're also defining and validating those roles, we want to be mindful to do so without splitting. You know, when we're working with children and teens, we're so eager to show them that they can, trust us and we can build that trust with them. And we want to let them know that we're rooting for them. And we want to be mindful and make sure that that is not setting up this idea that maybe we're, only siding with one person. And so I always tell my clients that just because, I'm on your side, that does not mean I'm against the parent. And I think that's really important to emphasize.
Yeah. And same with, again, parents that maybe even within the same household, if they're not getting along, or maybe one's not as supportive as therapy as the other, how can we make sure that what we're going back to is the kid's goals, and that we're not splitting or just distracting away from that. And some of that might even just be going with the resistance of what's going on with the system and how do we work with that resistance to meet the goals and make some progress. But I know that's something that we run into a lot is if there is contention between the different players of it, it's our role to help be the glue of that. Okay, you can agree to disagree and we can keep moving forward and making sure that we're not getting calls of, oh, you said this. We also get ahead of that too. And I tell parents, hey, if your child comes home and says, well, Abbie said to do, please call me because I also know this is your house, your rules. We might have stuff that we're working on in here. Ultimately, it also comes down to what's going on in your home. So please know that I would never undermine what's going on in your own home. And that stuff's going to happen. Kids are smart and that's a sign of intelligence. They're going to say, well, Abbie said that I can do. And that's where we're also getting ahead of that. If you ever hear that, please call us. And I will do the same thing if I'm hearing something that seems a little off about what your child said about you. And I'll call and say, hey, your child said this. Can you give me more of an understanding of what's going on? Or can we talk about this? And that's where our facilitator of communication really comes into play. And again, we're modeling these skills. The other thing that we have in here is being mindful of our own countertransference. And that's where our own self-awareness is really huge. We have to identify what might be triggering for ourselves, what might be coming up within me that is a potential point of friction for this case that I'm working on, or the relationships that I have. And that's where leaning on supervision is really helpful, and the team, which we do a lot of here. But being able to label what are your own triggers, what are your indicators of countertransference, how can you get ahead of that, and reframe the system that you're working with in a way that's therapeutic, that's constructive, that is able to put them first versus what's coming up for us. And if we can't do that, then that's an indicator that this probably isn't a case you should be working with.
Great. So, we're talking about all of these interactions with the parents and the children. And one that I think is really important and should be discussed in that first session is confidentiality. So, parents and young clients often have a lot of questions about what is being said between the different parties. And so we try to break that down very clearly for our clients and for their parents. I let both of them know that, when the client and I are in the room together, usually the things that we're talking about are going to stay in that room. Unless it gets a little muddy and we're talking about maybe potential harm or means intent to harm, or maybe someone has been harmed. There are a lot of our limitations to confidentiality that fall within our ethical obligations. Now, when I'm talking with clients, I also let them know that if that is the case, if some of those topics come up, it's not a surprise that I'm going to be talking with the parents. We have a conversation. The client and I sit down and I let them know, hey, do you remember in that first session, we talked about all the limitations of confidentiality? What you just told me is one of those times where maybe we need to bring the parent in for more support. And I always emphasize that we're doing this for support. I'm not doing this to tattle on you or to get your privileges taken away. We're really just doing this out of a measure of safety. The other thing that I tell parents and our clients is I'm going to be doing those parent check-ins. And whenever I do a parent check-in, I always let my client know first, and we have a discussion about it, and I gauge their level of comfort. So I always ask them, okay, I'm going to check in with your parents next week. Is there anything that you want me to bring up? Is there anything that you want me to absolutely stay away from? And the reason I do that is because it brings up a couple of things. One, Abbie was saying earlier, children and teens usually want their parents to be involved. And so sometimes, I'll have a client that wants to let mom know that they've been feeling depressed, or wants to let, their parent know that they've been stressed out about school. They just don't have the language yet. And here I can use my platform, I can use my role to kind of facilitate that conversation with their permission. I also want to just emphasize that, transparency for a variety of different reasons. It builds trust, and it lets the parent know that if there is anything that is worth mentioning, they don't have to be worried that I'm going to keep it from them. I will absolutely mention it.
Yeah. And going off of that trust, I think it's really important, because that's the basis of the whole relationship. Is therapy is only as good as what's brought to the table. And we want parents to know that they can come to us with information, and our clients to know that the minor client to know that they can come to us with information. And I think we walk our talk with that when we have a meeting with the client and say, hey, I'm going to be meeting with your parents. Is there anything I can say? Is there anything you don't want me to say? When they hear back from their parents and they know we didn't bring something up that didn't need to get brought up, and that they specifically asked us not to bring up, they're going to be that much more committed to what we're doing and trusting and continuing to build that trust of, oh, wow, they're really here for me, and they're looking at what I need and respecting my voice, which is really important for our younger kids, because a lot of times they're not getting that. And back to kind of what Becca was saying, if we ever have to break confidentiality, even if it's not necessarily, obviously, if it has to do with any suicidal ideation, hurting themselves or others, or abuse or neglect, of course we have to say that. And we let the kids know, because I don't ever want a client to leave and then get home to something that they don't know is happening. Hey, just so you know, I'm going to have to break confidentiality for that. Giving them a heads up really helps build that trust. But beyond that, we know there are instances that come up where there's risky behavior, or we know that there's things going on that would also benefit the system that's in place. And we're offering it to them hey, I'm going to have to bring this up to your parents. Do you want to bring it up first? Would you like me to bring it up, or should we invite them into session and we can bring it up all together? So I know I typically give 3 choices, and then I see where we can go. Ultimately, when we're looking at progress, we want the client can be able to bring it up to their parents. That's what we're working towards, because that's a system where we don't need to be a part of it. And that's the empowerment that we're working towards. But if they can't do that, then we're meeting, okay, should we invite them to session in 2 weeks? Or should we have a call right now? Should we bring mom in? And we're exploring what that is. And again, that gives them some agency and some autonomy within what's going on. And it's also setting a message to them that we care enough to reach out. One of the things I will say is if I know that a parent might not have, based off the parenting styles, might not have the most helpful reaction, one of the things I'm doing is I'm making sure I'm getting to those parents first. So I'm saying to my client, hey, I'm going to have to reach out to your parents and give them a heads up. How about if we circle back on this? But if I know that their initial reaction is going to be unhelpful, I want to be the one to have that and to feel that first, so that we can work on their second draft, their third draft of their reaction for the parents to be able to bring a more helpful reaction to the kids. And that's something that, again, I think really plays into when we've established all the stuff that we talked about earlier in this presentation. When I know that I have a good relationship with the mom because I put the work in, I can bring up some hard topics because we already have a foundation of trust. And I can talk about things and say, okay, let's work through this. How do we bring this up to your child in a way that's connecting, in a way that's helpful, and in a way that empowers them? So we can also be that buffer for the system, because we know we want the system ultimately to be here, and they might just not be. And that's where that confidentiality, if we're just doing clear cut, it's only about safety, neglect, and abuse, and everything else is the kid's room, that's not helpful. And if anything, that's alienating them from the system. We are an extension. We are an extra arm of the parents. They are, again, entrusting us. We're honored enough to have their kid in session with us. So we need to work with the system and work with the parents to set them up for success. Because if we just work with the kid in a vacuum and only keep full confidentiality, that is not honoring the system, or that's also clipping their wings of progress. Because how much can a 13-year-old or a 6-year-old or even a 17-year-old really progress if they don't have the support of their system? Any additional thoughts on that we can?
No, I thought that was great.
Okay. So hopefully this was helpful, and even just understanding really connecting, engaging ways to bring parents in and a part of the process. We really like to be able to frame this in a way that, again, goes down to empowerment and is helping work and progress towards goals. And the only way that we see that when working with kids and teens is having the parents or the system be part of it, and looking at how they can be a part of it and what's realistic with that. And I think the other thing that I would just say is we do have other trainings here at AMK. If you're interested in other trainings that we have, check out our training section. So it's www.amkcounseling.com. And you can see where some other trainings like this are to be able to help you out. Have a good day.
Thank you.